Well, I mean, you got to talk about the biggest game of the weekend, Bills Vikings. Vikings with that unbelievable comeback, and I want to talk about the play. I think it's a really interesting concept on offense and defense of the Dalvin Cook 81-yard touchdown run that kind of started the comeback late in the third quarter, down 17. And you run the ball, get an 81-yard gain for a touchdown, and then kind of the rest is history. And they come back and win one of the best games of all time.
So so it's the Dalvin Cook play that you want to break down. What about it did you love? Do we have a little there it is.
Here we go.
There's our little whiteboard action. All right, okay. Spell it out for us. How did this play happen that made such a major difference in the final score for this Vikings-Bills game?
So it's a really interesting concept, and we have to talk about it because of, as you can see here, these two high safeties, right, that I just circled, that I've underlined. Because once you play with two high safeties, you don't have enough players to deal with all the gaps in the run game. So if we just go here, let me change the color here. So if we just go here, we can see that the offensive line we have two tight ends over here, two receivers, and the five offensive linemen, and Dalvin Cook is here in the backfield. And what we have to understand is that everyone needs to be in a gap, basically. You can two gap, you can 1.5 gap, but basically everyone needs to be in a gap. So we have he's in a gap, 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 he's in a gap. So our issue right here, as you can see, is this place right here. That is the B gap. That is the weak side B gap. So how you have to defend that is in different ways. And what the Bills like to do is defend it by bringing a safety down. So in this case, it's going to be this safety right here. But the issue is, and what the Bills like to do is show you that they're going to stay in too high for as long as possible until they inevitably decide if they're going to come down and spin a safety down. And one of the reasons you do that in general is because you don't want to give away your hand. But also one of the issues of doing against the Vikings is this man right here is Mr. Justin Jefferson. So earlier in the game, they had a one-on-one, and Jefferson, I think, ran a comeback like this and just tore up the cornerback, right? So it's tough to, you don't want to show them. What you don't want to do is basically put this player, if I can do this, hold on a second. We're going to figure this out. Don't worry. We're going to figure this out. What you don't want to do is move the safety too early. Because if you move the safety too early, then what happens is you look like this, and then you have the one-on-one with Justin Jefferson. So you're like, okay, well, we're going to wait around, we're going to play it late, and then we're going to make our decision late. So the safety is up here. Let's go back to the Vikings side of the ball. We have two tight ends over here. What those two tight ends mean, so right here, what those two tight ends are showing you is that there's a heavy strength of that formation to the right side. So the Bills are saying, okay, well, what's the run play we're going to get from there? And generally the run play you're going to get from this formation is what we call a duo run. And all duo means is that we're going to try and get as many double teams. So here, hold on a second. So we're going to get double teams by these two players, and kind of by these two players. I'm going to push those double teams up to the second level, all the way up to these two linebackers. And we're just going to pound them. We're going to play with two tight ends to that side, plus you have Adam Thielen, who is in a tight split, and we're going to pound them. And they had run this earlier in the game, and they got maybe a couple yards. And generally when they're in this formation, they don't run this formation a lot, but generally they do run over here. So they're saying, all right, well, the Bills are saying, okay, how do we defend this duo run? We got to put big bodies over here. So Milano actually is aligned over here as the Vikings are lining up, and then shifts over here. So now he's in the A gap with Tremaine Edmonds, who's also pushed to that side of the field. So they're saying we have to deal with that with big bodies. We need our two linebackers to that side of the field. What the Vikings end up doing, they run weak zone, which means they're coming here into the B gap, right? The B gap that's open because we don't have the safety down. And this is a run that you're going to see time and time again in the NFL when teams are going to push over their linebackers and have that safety fill in late. And because the safety is filling in late, what ends up happening is you get really good angles here. Well, I'll delete 1 second. You get really good angle here on this block. You get a nice double team all the way up to Milano, and then Cook can gain this entryway into the B gap. The safety comes down. And because the safety is not already aligned in that B gap, what they do, and what most teams do, is they'll tell the receiver over here, we don't block corners. Cornerbacks are loser tacklers, right? Most cornerbacks don't want to get involved in the run game.
Especially
so what we're going to do is we're going to tell this wide receiver, Justin Jefferson, to come up the field and then go and block that safety who's coming down, because you have a good angle on him because he's coming from 10 to 12 yards. They get this block. The corner, so Dalvin Cook is in the hole right now. The corner is like, oh, am I following Jefferson? It might be a pass play, it might be a play action. He's late, and then Cook is kind of down the sideline for 81 yards. So just a good example of saying, like, okay, we want to play too high. Yeah, we want to spin late, but here are the issues we get when we're going to push our linebackers over to one side of the field, keep that open B gap open. We have bad angles on that weak side run. And watching the Vikings earlier this season, they played the Saints in London, and the Saints, so it's a little different, but the Saints were already had a player down there. They were like kind of showing one high, I believe. But one of the differences in this B gap, with this open B gap, what a lot of teams like to do is say, okay, instead of just telling this player to, yeah, you have the C gap, that's it, whatever, we're going to open up the B gap. What they did in this game, what the Saints did, was spike him into the B gap. And all that does is it forces the player like Dalvin Cook to bounce it earlier. And once you bounce it and you go laterally, you allow players like this, who now he doesn't have the B gap anymore, he's the C gap player, to make a play. The Bills don't do that. The Bills try and play it more simply, I would say. They get caught, 81-yard run. Ladies and gentlemen, the comeback of the century happens.
Mike, what do you think about that? What do you think about the Vikings run game overall and them being able to spring that big play?
Yeah, and the other aspect of it is you have a guy in Justin Jefferson who's a willing blocker, comes in and takes on a safety head-to-head that not a lot of wide receivers getting over 1,000 yards. Like top-end wide receivers are willing to stick their nose in like he is. You have Christian Darrisaw left tackle with a kick-out block where he just throws A.J. Epinesa 4 yards to allow the space there to then make that broken tackle, the one-on-one with the cornerback, a lot easier for Dalvin Cook. And you have Garrett Bradbury with a nice little reach on the nose tackle. Like, it's scheme, great aspect of it, but then you have to have the players to execute. And right now the Vikings have those players to execute.
Yeah.